And because we can never get enough of, in terms of beautiful pictures of the night sky, we're going to call to the podium Stan Hondas. I've gotten to know Stan pretty well over the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. He is an unassuming guy, but let me tell you, he is an A-list astrophotographer, and he's been very generous, and more importantly, with sharing his photos and letting all of us utilize them. And I think it's wonderful that he's here to speak about his work. Stan. Oh yeah. Ollie, can we dim the lights also?
Thanks a lot, Kelly, and thanks for allowing me to show my work here at the IDA General Meeting. It's quite a privilege to do this. Thanks, Ollie. So what does a night sky look like? Over the past few days, we've heard many answers to this question and many solutions to these answers. It's encouraging to hear how we can work in different ways to preserve the night sky above us and retain the view that humanity and all animal life has had over the eons. I'm a professional photographer, and one of the projects I've been working on for the past few years have been making what I call night sky landscapes, essentially wide-angle views of the Earth with the sky as an important element of the image. Okay. I got it, Ellie. Thanks a lot. Ideally, we go out at night and look up and see a sky full of stars, like this view from Arches National Park in southern Utah. Unfortunately, most of us can't see this type of sky from where we live, including me. I'm based in the severely light-polluted city of New York, and I travel mostly to the American West to seek dark skies to photograph. The sky above us should look the same wherever we are on Earth, but for the artificial light being produced, we could all see views like this. I'm fortunate to have been a National Park Service Artist in Residence at 5 national parks, which greatly influenced my work. It's quite a privilege to be able to live and work for a time in the parks and experience the environment and the beauty of the sky. This view from the north rim of the Grand Canyon in 2015 shows the canyon lit by a setting moon as the stars shine above it. Apologies to the Grand Canyon people. This was shot in 2015, and I think you probably made a lot of improvements since then. I was using this as an example that even from the dark north rim, lights from Tusayan and the south rim complex can be seen on the horizon. At Rocky Mountain National Park, the glow from Estes Park, and even Denver can be seen looking to the east and south. Photography is the one art form that is directly affected by light pollution. Camera sensors are very sensitive, and there's no getting around artificial light being recorded, whether as a light dome or reflected off of clouds. Many parks are very dark sites, but light encroaches from nearby towns or cities. But looking straight up into the Colorado sky at Rocky Mountain, I could see an array of bright stars in this view through a grove of lodgepole pine trees. It's truly inspirational when you look up and see the blanket of stars and a dense disk of the Milky Way, something that most of the population of our world can't see from where they live. National parks and wilderness areas are the last refuge for protected environments and dark skies. It becomes even more important to maintain the public lands that we currently have. I approach my work in a documentary fashion, as my background is in photojournalism. Being someone who has always used natural available light, I rely on moonlight to illuminate the landscape of many of my images, as in this photo of the large kiva at Quetzalcoatl at Chacoculture National Historical Park in New Mexico. I spent a month at Chacoculture as an artist in residence, and it was an amazing experience to be among these great houses at night. A crescent moon provides just enough light on the landscape without washing out the stars. With a few exceptions, all these photos are single frames to keep the integrity of the scene in order to present the images in an accurate and honest manner. My goal is to portray the sky as it really looks in relation to the earth below. I'm hoping that in this way, those who can't reach the sites can appreciate the photographs, and maybe some viewers will be inspired to experience these landscapes firsthand. Photography can also show the passage of time and the movement through space. I photographed the moon every 10 minutes as it's set at Petrified Forest National Park in Arizona to give a sense of how it moves through the sky. This image is a series of photos I assembled later in my computer, as well as this star trail at Wupake National Monument, also in Arizona. A long exposure, this one is the equivalent of 1 hour of time and shows the motion of the stars. Of course, it is us, the Earth, that is revolving through space, creating the illusion of stars circling Polaris. A nearby first quarter moon illuminated the walls of the Lumaki Pueblo, built over 700 years ago by a people that lived in the Painter Desert region. Some phenomena needs to be seen in a very dark site. The zodiacal light is one of them. The triangle of light extending up from the horizon, intersecting with the Milky Way, is a sight not to be forgotten. This was photographed at Pueblo del Arroyo in Chaco culture. Zodiacal light is sunlight reflecting particles of rock and ice along the plane of our solar system. Working at night when others are sleeping, I'm usually alone and it's dark and very quiet. The long exposures give me a chance to take in the surrounding vistas. Looking up, I see a picture of the past. Distances to the stars and galaxies are so far that their light takes decades, millennia, and even millions of years to reach us. Through the work, I gain an appreciation of the natural world around us. I hope that people who see the photographs will too. An idea I've been working on are what my wife calls botanicals, close-up images of plants with the stars in the background. Often the lens of my camera is about 1 foot from the subject, as in this shot of a pinyon pine branch on the north rim of the Grand Canyon. The out-of-focus stars produce a nice pattern, and the familiar constellations stand out against the fainter stars. This image was my second astronomy picture of the day, which is a nice recognition of the work. One challenge is to place interesting elements in a photo that adds a human perspective to the scene. I think people can relate to these photos because the sky is seen in relation to a familiar landscape. A stump from a pine tree on the shore of Jackson Lake made a nice foreground for this view with the Big Dipper at Grand Teton National Park. To me, nature is very subtle, and I tried to evoke that look in the photographs. The light from a waxing moon helps out here, giving depth to the composition. I was with a friend here in Utah early last month at Arches National Park and managed to find this branch of a dead juniper tree in our campground a few hours before dawn one morning. One result of this technique is the stars' colors are accentuated. Many of the stars in Orion are blue, Betelgeuse is red, blue-white Rigel at nearly magnitude 0 appears white. Aldebaran in the center of the frame glows with the orangish color of a giant aging star. Another result of the late night, early morning shooting sessions is very little sleep, but that's another presentation. In a small way, this art has already contributed to the preservation of the night sky. Chaco Culture in 2013 and the Flagstaff Area National Monuments in 2016 used photos I took while I was at the parks in their successful applications for status as an IDA International Dark Sky Park. Venturing to the southern hemisphere, the Magellanica Clouds are incredible sights from Purnululu National Park in Western Australia. Our two sister galaxies look like cotton balls hanging in the deep black sky. This is probably one of the best skies that I've photographed. Back in the northern hemisphere, the Arctic region on the archipelago of Svalbard, we witnessed this tremendous aurora borealis just 12 hours after the 2015 vernal equinox total solar eclipse. You can almost feel the power of the solar wind in a display like this. Occasionally I get lucky and get a Perseids meteor streaking by the Andromeda Galaxy in this picture shot over Rocky Mountain National Park. Meteors are one of the things that can't be predicted, so it's always nice to see one show up in an image. Another object that can be photographed is a man-made one, the International Space Station. Seen as a streak in this 5.5-minute exposure shot from the top of Mount Cadillac in Acadia National Park in Maine. As a follower of space exploration since I was a child, it always amazes me to see this spot of light and realize that humans are aboard, orbiting the Earth. The moon is one of the largest and nicest objects in the sky to view and photograph. Planning is a big part of a successful photo, And fortunately, much of the universe is regular and predictable. Doing research before a trip to Big Bend National Park, I saw that the Moon, Venus, and Mercury were to be close in the sky after sunset. Once in the park, it was a matter of finding the right landscape to complete the image. The old moon in the young moon's arm is how a waxing crescent moon is often described. This very bright Earthshine was seen in a 2-day-old moon over the Very Large Array Radio Telescope installation in New Mexico. And in a coincidental alignment, this was yesterday's astronomy picture of the day. Another part of my work is documentary in nature. And in this photo, I combined the two themes. Last year, a writer, a friend, and I published a book called Moving Walls, The Barracks of America's Concentration Camps, about the barracks that held Japanese Americans who were unjustly incarcerated during World War II. This particular barrack is from the camp called Heart Mountain in northern Wyoming, and is situated on the very site where the camp existed 76 years ago. The story is about both American history and, in part, my family's history, as my mother and father, their mothers, fathers, brothers, and sisters were forcibly rounded up and incarcerated, though at a different camp in Arizona. People ask what I shoot when I'm at home in New York. Living in one of the brightest places on Earth, one doesn't think of night sky photos. But there's plenty to see and photograph in the sky above my city. In New York, the skyline becomes the landscape. We don't have mountains, lakes, or lodgepole pine trees, but we have tall buildings. From Central Park, I shot a crescent moon rising between buildings on the east side of Manhattan just before sunrise one morning. I belong to the Amateur Astronomers Association of New York, one of the oldest astronomy clubs in the country, and we created an astro-photography group with talented members shooting wide-angle night sky landscapes and imagers taking remarkable photos through telescopes of deep sky objects from in and around the city. Fighting through the light and haze, our members managed to create amazing images. The full moon is a common subject, and finding an interesting foreground is a challenge. Last June, we saw that the full moon was going to rise behind the buildings of Lower Manhattan, but we had to be in a park 13 miles away from New York in New Jersey. This so-called strawberry moon, full moon, rose as predicted, while the dying rays of the setting sun behind us illuminated the glass buildings. I've been honored in being recognized with several APODs over the years. 3 of them, including this one, have been photos I shot in and around New York City. Fortunately, New York has several iconic buildings and statues which we take advantage of. 2 days after a new moon earlier this year, the Empire State Building was lit green in honor of Eid al-Fitr, the celebration that marks the end of the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. Occasionally, a setting moon will align with the Statue of Liberty, as it did during the crescent phase last year. Another goal I have for the images is to show that all of us on this fragile Earth are under the same sky. No matter where you are, the moon, the Milky Way, the stars are all the same and shine down on us equally. I've learned quite a bit during this meeting and hope to continue this process. Drawing from the theme of this conference, I'll just say, look up into the sky and enjoy the wonders of the universe. You can see more of my photos on my website. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook if you wanted to follow me. So thanks very much for your attention.
Any questions for Sam? I'll allow a couple minutes. We're right at the end of the day, and I know Scott has nothing to say. So, anyone want to ask him a question?
I'll just, in the meantime, mention that Sam has graciously gifted everyone here a couple of images to download at that bit.ly link. It's bit.ly.com/AGM2018pics. So you can go there and have those pictures for yourself to use. So thank you, Sam.
Thanks,
for that
Sam.
gift.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm just curious what the specs, pardon? Oh, name, Keith Kruger. Yeah, I'm just curious about the specs of the lens you're using in terms of focal length and f ratio.
Okay, yeah, most of the pictures that I showed you were taken with wide-angle lenses. I use a Nikon D850 camera with a 14, the lens I use the most is a 14 millimeter to 24 millimeter zoom, and most of them, like this picture of Big Ben, was shot at 14 millimeter, so it's a pretty wide-angle view. A few of the moon pictures were shot with various telephoto length lenses that I have, so those were a little bit different than the wide field sky pictures.
Do try this at home.
Right. Yeah. Try this at home. Where you live, you could definitely see the moon. You could see planets. I could see them from New York City. So if I could see them, then anybody could see them.
Lucas Schuler from Dark Sky, Switzerland. Stan, I appreciate a lot your work. My question is, you mentioned the falling stars, but often airplanes, at least in Europe, are a lot of trouble to get nice pictures.
Right.
What is in your work?
Oh, yeah. Airplanes. If you don't like streaks of airplanes through the pictures, it can take quite a while. Most of the time, I shoot multiple pictures of each scene, and oftentimes it could take 20 minutes or half an hour to get a single image because depending on the track of the airplane, if it's going across left to right, it's fine. If the plane is going away toward the horizon in front of you, it could take quite a while for the plane to clear. But a lot of photography is just a lot of patience and waiting. And so if I'm under a sky like this, I don't really mind waiting too much because it's just such a beautiful scene. It gives me a little bit chance to do a little more stargazing.
This will be the last question.
I was just curious what, Ben Benet. I'm curious what sort of planning tools you use to line up like the moon and the stars and planets and...
Yeah, the two things that I use the most are Stellarium, which is a free planetarium software that you could download to your computer and your phone. That's an excellent one to go planning, and you can kind of go forward, backwards in time and put a location in, and you can see what objects that will be up in the sky. The photographer's ephemeris, TPE, that's another one I use pretty much constantly. You could put a location in on they have a Google map. You could put a precise location in, and you could see where the sun and the moon are rising and setting from your location. So you see both the compass setting and the altitude as it goes up and down during the day or night. So those are two planning things that I use quite a bit. But I also do, I take physical star charts and I print out a lot of stuff because when I'm in, everybody says, what kind of apps do you use for your phone? And I don't really use apps on my phone because if I'm in a wilderness area where I really want to be, where I could see stars like this, it's not a lot of apps require either a cell phone connection or internet connection. And so if you don't have either of those, your apps might not work. But if you got a paper star chart or if you got some planisphere, then that's going to work. You don't need batteries for that.
Great. Well, thank you, Stan.
Yeah, thanks very much.